Hi everyone, my name is Mathieu. I'm a PhD student at the Hearing Institute in Paris. I work on temporal predictions in music listening, and today I'm going to talk about how we can study them in electrophysiological recordings and also how predictions can influence memory. Okay, so one striking ability of the brain is to remember complex songs and to recognize them in a few seconds. But we also know that there are some songs that are more memorable than others, right? So the question is, what are the features of those songs that make them more or less memorable? Of course, you can think of purely acoustic features that would drive this phenomenon, but we also know that the brain uses statistical regularities to process information and to generate predictions about upcoming sensory events. And this is especially the case in music listening because music is highly statistical. There's a huge amount of regularities. And so one idea is that some statistical features of the songs, such as, for instance, how surprising the note sequences are, can be used in the memory process to guide it. Okay, and so the question of this project is how do statistical regularities influence memory encoding? So to answer this question, we combine behavior analysis of a memory task and electrophysiological recordings in two different cohorts of participants. But first, before doing this, we need to compute those features, the statistical features I told you about, such as surprise. One first idea we could have to do this would be to have a look at the probability of transitions between notes. So for instance, if you have a given note that is played, the next one is not going to be taken randomly. There are some distributions that you can compute. The problem is that in naturalistic music, the transitions are more complex than that. You can have huge patterns of notes that can be repeated, and there are also other musical rules that are in play. And so what we decided to do in this project was to use more complex models, so deep learning models that learn the statistical regularities of music. They are trained on huge data sets of music, and once they are trained, they can generate probability distribution of upcoming notes given the beginning of note sequences. And what we can actually do is take the output probability distribution and we can extract the statistical features I told you about, such as surprise. And then what we want to do is to see whether those statistical features are encoded in the brain. So what we did is relate those statistical features to neural signals, and we found a significant amount of variability in the neural signals that can be explained by those statistical regularities, both in MEG, magnetoencephalography, and intracranial EEG. And we also saw that the different statistical features that we extracted show different temporal dynamics of encoding in the brain. So I emphasized surprise, but there are other statistical features such as how uncertain about pitch and timing the model is. Next, we looked at the behavior. So the memory task was composed of many songs that were played. It was piano excerpts that were played over the course of the experiment and repeated 3 times. And participants on each trial had to say whether or not this particular song was already played previously. So first we looked at the overall performance of the task and could see that the participants could do it. And then we had a look at what are the features of the songs that impact memory performance. And we found that the statistical features do significantly influence memory performance. So if we take just an example, if we look at surprise, what it means is that basically surprising songs are easier to remember. But then the final question is, what are the actual neural mechanisms that are involved in this process? How do statistical features bias memory? And so we tried to see whether neural activity could explain the difference between correct trials and incorrect trials. So we had a look at the intracranial data and contrasted correct versus incorrect trials. And so that in some brain regions, there was a difference in neural activity. And especially in the hippocampus, which we expected since it's a brain region involved in memory encoding, we saw that correct trials were associated with higher neural activity. And we could go deeper in this analysis and saw that there was actually a difference in the temporal dynamics of this effect. If we compare the detection of novel songs that were not played before with the recognition of old songs, we can see that this effect in the difference of activity in the hippocampus happens at different timings during the songs. So for instance, the novelty detection decision tends to happen, or at least this effect happens in the second half of the songs, whereas recognizing old songs happens in the first half, for instance. And then we are now at this step, and the next step is actually to have a look at more specific neural markers of memory in the frequency domain. For instance, we can have a look at at phase amplitude coupling, sorry. And finally, what we are interested in, trying to see a link between the statistical features and the neural markers. Thank you to the organizer, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mathieu. Very interesting talk. Any question for Mathieu? Yes.
Hi, thanks a lot for the talk. I have a question that is not strictly related to what you talked about, I think. But I've always been curious about the timbre. So what characterizes the way in which you produce the sound, right? Which is something that we recognize very easily. But as far as I know, there is no obvious way in which we can actually quantify it. For example, if a note is produced by a piano, by an organ, or something else, is it something that the deep learning can learn? And is it something interesting for this type of questions?
Yes, so thank you for the question. So for the deep learning model, no, because this model works with only basically the actual notes that are discretized in a given format that is made especially for music, the MIDI format. But actually, it's a good thing because we don't want to have the effects of other variables. The timbre, for instance, would be something that is an acoustic feature. But then when we relate the statistical features to the neural signals, we also use a lot of controls that are acoustic controls, and I haven't shown them here, but so that we make sure that the effects we find are coming from statistical features. And in the controls, there are controls like brightness that can be related to what you said. And then the other thing is that basically the whole data set during the experiment, it was from the same piano. So there was no difference in this aspect, but it's still controlled for.